Stop resisting! Stop resisting!
A Wisconsin man says police beat him while he was having a seizure, then charged him for assaulting an officer.
Advocates say we need to change how the criminal justice system deals with people who have those medical conditions.
Fox 6 investigator Amanda St. Hilaire explains.
Racine police say this came down to a split-second decision. But now there's a push to rethink how police approach these situations. Advocates say there's one change that could make a big difference.
Woke up in the hospital with my eye severely beaten closed.
More than 2 years later, Tyron Pinkins says he still has no memory of how he ended up like this.
The doctor told me that I had a seizure.
That wasn't a surprise. Pinkins says he'd had seizures before, but could not afford medication.
I just was experiencing homelessness.
Pinkins says he was surprised to go from the hospital to jail. Charged with battery to a law enforcement officer, attempting to disarm and resist an officer, and disorderly conduct. Court records show it was more than 6 months before Pinkins could post bail.
There was times where I wanted to give up, times where I didn't know, what was next.
The case went on for almost 2 years before the charges were dropped.
At that moment, I knew God was real. I mean, I like my heart dropped, my blood, everything just got the pumping. It was just like, and I just couldn't do nothing but just drop my head and cry.
But Pinkins says he still did not have a clear picture of what happened the night of his seizure. He finally got the police footage.
Man down, laying the grass.
And brought it to Fox 6.
Take rescue, looks like he might be having a seizure.
Court records say Racine police officer Joshua Diedrich responded.
Are you all right?
He described Pinkins as on the ground shaking from an apparent seizure.
Can you have him sit down? Because I don't want to fight with him.
Pinkins eventually opened his eyes.
But are you all right? Can you sit down for me?
But he was stumbling.
Does he talk at all?
Not responding.
What is going on with him?
I don't know, I'm trying to understand.
Does he speak?
Diedrich says he grabbed Pinkins to prevent him from walking into traffic.
Fair call, make it a quick 40.
That's when the medical call got physical.
Stop resisting! Stop resisting!
Eventually, backup arrived.
He's going for your gun, watch it.
Officer Diedrich went to the hospital.
Wash me in the face.
So did Pinkins.
He's got puke and blood on him.
The vomit was probably from the seizure. The blood was probably from the police response.
Art Taggart has spent decades advocating for people who have seizures.
Does he talk at all?
Not during the seizure.
He says Pinkins' behavior in the dash cam footage is not unusual. Because after a seizure, the brain takes time to recover.
That's called the post-ictal phase.
Each case is different, but neurologists say some people do become combative, especially when restrained.
That person is not aware of who you are or what your purpose is or that you're a police officer.
The person may appear to be conscious, but also unable to respond or follow instructions.
Turn off your car! Do it now!
Like this man in Dane County.
How much have you been drinking?
Charged with OWI after having a seizure.
He said he didn't even know he hit anything.
It's as if a tape recorder has stopped and there's not even any tape going through the recorder. So the person doesn't even realize there's a gap in his memory.
Once charges are filed, it can take a long time to get them dropped, especially for people who've had run-ins with police before, like Tyron Pinkins with a felony conviction.
It is very difficult sometimes to move that needle.
Then there's the worst case scenario. In 2000, a 50-year-old Wisconsin man died as police restrained him during a seizure.
Clearly, when incidents like this happen, it underscores the need for that kind of training.
The Epilepsy Foundation helps first responders recognize seizures and adjust responses.
It would have been better for that officer to go out of the person's field of vision, and then if he's going to wander out into that street past the stop and go lights, gently take him by the shoulders and just turn him in another direction, because he'll just veer into that new direction.
Being a police officer, you're faced with split-second decisions. There's always room for improvement.
Racine police say they did not find any wrongdoing in this case, but admit their officers have not had seizure training.
That's something we probably could do a better job of training our officers in dealing with recognizing those types of situations.
Are there any upcoming plans to engage in that kind of training or set it up?
Yeah, not at this point. We have our training set for winter, so maybe down the line we can get somebody to come in and help with that training.
But what happens when there's a training conflict? The blank look that could signal a seizure,
The 1,000-yard stare.
is used in other police training as a sign the person could attack.
I've had somebody who gave me that stare when I was in my squad car that was walking by me with a man with a gun call, and ended up he shot at me. So in that situation with Officer Dietrich, he didn't know what Mr. Pinkins was going to do, but he recognized those signs. In my situation, I didn't know what that person was going to do, but I recognized that sign, and I'll never forget that stare. It's a tough situation.
I still have panic attacks. I have bad vision, nightmares. It's real.
Tyron Pinkins says he's moving forward by making changes, like going back to school.
I just want it better for myself. I got children. I got family who needs to see, better.
When it comes to that night, he says he'll likely never remember. Pinkins keeps coming back to one thing.
Justice will be saying that no one has to go through it the way I did.
Police say once they write up the report, it's up to the district attorney's office to decide whether to go through with the charges. No one from the Racine DA's office has returned our calls. We also haven't heard from Joshua Dietrich. Racine police say he left the department last year for a different job. With the Fox 6 investigators, I'm Amanda St. Hilaire.
Now, when we think of seizures, a lot of people think of convulsions, but the Epilepsy Foundation says often that is not what happens. We have links to resources about that on our website, fox6now.com. That's also where you can find an extended cut of the dash cam footage you just saw provided to us by Racine Police.